Hello and welcome to episode 4, I think, of Mordred's Community Multiplayer, EU4. As always, joined by Brother Zale. Zale, how's it going?
Going pretty good. How are you?
Doing well. So first, let's take a quick peek. Great powers. Any surprises here? Any shocks?
Not really, no. Maybe Momluke's still being on there. It's a little bit late for Momluke's, but otherwise not really.
Yeah, pretty bread and butter. I'll be interested to see down in this 5 through 8 section as Manchu and Japan get going with their continued destruction of Ming. How long that lasts, but yeah, no surprises, I don't think, this session for me. Okay, so Manchu, Japan, Ming is Ming ploding. How big of a threat is this Asian bloc going to be if they come to some sort of border agreement?
Um, it really depends on who you are. Obviously for me and the Golden Horde, it's a pretty big threat. But for Bakhwanis, it's very interesting because that's a kind of a thick region that Burma and Siam. So it's going to be, I think, unusual methodology needed for Japan to kind of get into contact and with Bahamas, but like for if you're you in France or um, Hungary or someone, then probably not that big of a threat. Japan and Manchu have more important things to do, I guess, is how I would look at it. But they are going to be very strong, especially Japan. Rarely in Manchu is going to be decently strong, of course, with manners, but he doesn't have the great start, I think. Just looking at how their borders are right now, I definitely think that Manchu is getting the kind of the bottom rung of the deal here. Um, so it's interesting to see how that will last. Not to throw Erdos on the bus, but given his India last time and that sort of stuff, it's going to be. He said he wanted to improve his reputation. Um, so it's going to be interesting to see if they actually continue to work together like Kerb and I did as Nepal and Qing last time, or if they'll come to blow because Eratos is getting the more valuable stuff at the moment. But yeah, I think for the ones kind of nearby, especially me and Timurids, I think Timurids and them are going to come to agreement though. But for those of us, I think it's a decent threat that's kind of looming on the horizon. But the person that has the most to fear, I think, in a long-term sense, would be the Bakhvanis, and I think they got a couple sessions to kind of finalize whatever it is they're planning for India and Burma before that threat actually arrives. And at that point, I don't know that Japan and Manchu would be enough to stop Bakhvanis. This Bakhvanis is already very strong, and Japan is going to need to sit on China for a little bit to kind of consolidate and digest that before they're really into their own.
And Majapahit we'll just touch on briefly. Decent session for them. Decent expansion. Still probably a little bit smaller than you'd expect, but they've got Pasai under them as a vassal. Consolidated most of the Malacca, and that trade node coming along from an eco perspective. But yeah, not a ton going on in Southeast Asia currently. But you mentioned Timurids, and I want to touch on this. Timurids was the focal point of the major player war this session. Golden Horde attacked Timurids. Baja got involved at one point. Mamelukes got involved at another point. Timurids appears to be a little bit diplomatically isolated. They do have an ally here in Mewar who was not here today. Mewar maintains a border agreement with Baja. If that remains in place, it makes it a little bit interesting as Baja may fight wars against Timurids, but it's difficult for them to gain territory. You mentioned Manchu and Japan. Do you see Golden Horde, Mamluks, Baja versus Timurids, Mewar, Manchu, Japan as the sides in Asia, or is it much more fluid and dynamic than that?
I think that's a fair sort of just off the cuff assigning of the sides, but I think it is going to be a little bit more fluid. Um, Timmy is kind of up against the clock here. Obviously, one-on-one, he would destroy me in the Golden Horde. But like I was just saying, Japan has quite a ways to go in order to get into where Bothwanus is and to be a real, I think, presence there. And it could be not the case. I could be mistaken. I think I briefly mentioned that it could be, you know, Eratos and Rarely are hoping to take all of Persia and stuff for themselves, India and Persia. In which case, they would love nothing more than to lead Timmy on and make Bakhmanis think that they're going to be coming and slow down the wars here. So, I think everything going as they appear, those are going to be the sides. But in reality, given the nature of the players involved, I think this is going to be a lot more fluid.
And then, as we shift and touch on another player war from the previous session, Ireland took advantage of your the length of your war with the Timurids and the state that you were in, stole or got a decent chunk out of you. Quite a bit of land that did belong to Novgorod and a little bit of land that did belong to you. How much Irish expansion should we expect in the Novgorod trade node?
That's an interesting question. It's a very interesting situation because I was talking with Panda about doing a trade deal and how interested he was in the Novgorod, and he said he wasn't, which is why I kind of expanded as much as I did into the Novgorod node. And obviously that hasn't really held true. So it's hard for me to say off the cuff because I would say maybe this is about as far as we're gonna see where he just takes Novgorod and doesn't come further. I can't imagine he has too much to gain unless he's desiring to touch tips with Timmy. But the rest of my land is steppes, and he doesn't have the Cossack estate. But I don't know. It's gonna be. If you'd asked me earlier, before session, I would have been very definite in my answer. But right now, I really don't know what Panda is gonna do because he could spend a lot of time fighting, sieging me down. But there's a lot of tension I'm sure we'll cover here in Europe. As I've heard from certain individuals that you've been trying to push for a world war, and I think Ireland might have more to view at home if that's the truth, than kind of facing up way over here in the Horde land.
And as we shift a little bit further to the west, we'll touch on a block I like to call the Easterners, Brandenburg, Poland, Hungary, kind of, sort of, maybe Milan to be included in that block. They did not get involved on your behalf against Irish aggression in the region. Maybe it was positioning, timing, whatever. Where do you see the Easterners focusing their attention? Are they going to take advantage of some of the instability and weakness here, or are we looking towards a war in Germany?
If they were smart, they'd probably invade me at the session start. Um, in terms of making it max, but that would probably call in Bakhmanis. I don't know if Helena would bother to fight in that war, but I get the feeling she probably would. And the reason this comes down to the real reason that they didn't get involved with Ireland, didn't get involved with me or Timmy, and that's because you've been kind of gunning after Curb since he's sold Orthodox all around the world except to you. And so I think they're kind of leery of getting involved in the far or further east, when that would just leave them exposed to the west, which is very common for the nations here in Central Europe and just I guess all of Europe. They're mostly kind of I think afraid to attack one way because they'll just get invaded from another way.
Yeah, let's flip this on its head here, Zale, and switch up the dynamic. So, I'm playing France. Right now, I'm relatively large, highest manpower, relatively high from an eco perspective, um, compared. So, I'm 4 in the world on eco, probably 4 on force limit, 1 on manpower, but I've kind of fucked myself from a diplomatic perspective, early in the game, prior to the first session, I had an opportunity to align with either Spain or England against the other party. I chose to try to play it a little more fluid, a little more dynamic, but unfortunately, that spooked them both, and I guess brought them together as bedfellows. So now I'm pinned where I would love to attack one of them, but I can't. Because if I attack one, then the other one joins, and even though I'm relatively strong, they're right there with me. We're one, two, and or two, three, and four in the world, and I'm actually four, so probably the weakest out of the three of us. As you mentioned, I've had quite a bit of animosity towards Poland. Curb sold Orthodoxy to England in Milan, session one, uh, without a doubt to slow me down or contest me. So while I have been aggressive towards Curb, I will say I believe he fired the first shot. So that's caused a little bit of tension here. Rarely, when he stepped in for Mindboy, expanded Bavaria drastically, uh, essentially cut off my expansion borders into the Easterners. So now I'm kind of stuck. What do I do?
I think this is the sort of common predicament for a lot of the people in Europe, and I think everyone in Europe has a few options, and they basically boil down to um, taking a risk somewhere. And for you, for instance, you could the obvious thing would be to invade Bavaria, invade Ireland or Spain, or invade Jamie. That's those are sort of the main routes are open to you. But you could also do something very drastic and say like betray Hanover, and perhaps work with Bavaria or work with Milan, or Milan gets Bavaria and then you take over Hanover. Um, but
So
it's yeah,
I will put this out there. I tried to bully Bavaria several times today during the session. He did not break. I love Mindboy. I've made him a official peace offer. I've offered 1,000 ducats for the province of Strasbourg, and then to call our border official. So no aggression from me after that point. We'll see if he accepts. He has not responded yet, but I'm putting that out there. So let's consider Bavaria off the table.
I mean, we could, but meaning no offense, a lot of the deals you've made of the past two seasons kind of been brutally cut short, and not by the other party's volition. So, but let's just assume Bavaria is off the table. In which case, there isn't a lot of options for you other than to invade. I would have to say England and Spain, because if you invade, in my eyes, if you invade Milan, then you're just basically asking to let Ireland and Spain get really strong and then attack you later on. Um, so yeah, you either do that or you build tall, and I think that's true for a lot of people. There's like one obvious person to attack or group to attack, and it opens you up to invasion. So you either do that and risk the invasion, or you kind of build tall until someone gets bored enough or thinks they're strong enough that they do risk the invasion.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. I take offense. I don't think I broke a single agreement last season. 2 seasons ago, I broke many an agreement. I will admit that. Um, but last session, Fizz was dead well before I attacked him. Um, and we never actually had a border. So I honored my Indian agreements as well. If you were Spain, you've got endless expansion into Africa right now. Um, your eco's booming. Your manpower, production, you're well built. Your age bonus expires within 50 years. Do you use this opportunity to attack France or Milan, or do you wait and see?
Um, that's really kind of interesting quandary. And being Spain and Ireland, they're definitely the main powers, the sort of dynamic duo that can control the fate of a lot of different people. So it's kind of up to them and how they're feeling. Because letting you live longer is just letting France get more devs so they can eventually take it, in my eyes. So for Spain, he still has all of Africa that he can kind of push into. Not all, but a lot of Africa that he can push into and spend another session kind of really solidifying that. Of course, there's the obvious expansion into the Mamluks, but I don't actually know that that's right now the smart decision, because if he attacks the Mamluks, that lets Timmy kind of recover, because their truce is up. That was a separate war, and their truce is already up. That would let Timmy invade perhaps Hungary as well. And so rather than waiting for Hungary maybe to get involved in a war and Timmy to die, and that would let Spain kind of eat as much of the Mamluks as he wants, assuming, of course, Gaps wants to go into the Mamluks. If he waits and just kind of takes that sub-Saharan African stuff, waits for Hungary and Timmy to get busy or too weak, I think that's the smarter play. And so yeah, does he attack you? That's really up to him, and up to Ireland. If Ireland is keen for it, then yes. We've already seen that Spain on his own can't beat Milan, and I would assume that Jamie would either help you just to maintain status quo,
Well,
or
Spain actually lost to Milan in that war.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, we've already seen that he's lost that war, right?
Oh, okay.
So what I'm saying here is that it's really, if that's what Spain is desiring, it's kind of up to Ireland, because he will need Irish help to fight that and win that war. Because on his own, he would not be able to win against France and Milan. And as I said, I do think Milan would get involved. Um, Probably just to maintain the status quo. I don't know how eager Jamie is to really break his agreement and take more land from Spain, but he has shown himself to be very willing to stop expansions of his neighbors and his rivals in order to maintain a balance of power where he has a favorable position.
What is this?
That is the island of Lesbo.
Why is it Milanese?
I would assume because Milan owns it, but perhaps it's all a ruse.
Are you hiding something from our viewers here, Zach?
I would never do that, no.
So you're not going to comment?
I have nothing to comment on there. It's an unknown entity to me.
Oh boy. Fizz does not have a fort here. Interesting. Okay. And now let's pivot a little bit. Portugal finally broke out of their shell, had a massive growth session. Economy is humming. Let's see, have they popped their mission? No, not yet. Okay. Or wait, oh yes, they have. Great. They're starting to grow. They're expanding rapidly in South America. Their African holdings have grown slightly. How many more years does Portugal need before they can come back to Europe and start flexing their muscle?
That's a great question. And if I'm being honest, Portugal had a wonderful session today, but I think I would have liked for Portugal to be here at the start of this past session. For me, I think that if he had been here at the start, he would be in a much more favorable position, and rather than going and getting involved in Europe, I think it would be very good of him to expand more into Africa. Particularly Kilwa, who's relatively isolated. Not to throw Charles under the bus, but him and Majapahit has really struggled. Again, not to throw Zero Morales under the bus, but while everyone else is being caught up in all these political shenanigans, Portugal basically has the run of the world. The only real naval power that kind of has projection around the world. I assume Ireland has a decent navy, but it's probably all stuck. Spain, likewise. So, I think to answer your question more concretely, we probably have one more session where he is going to be sort of isolationist. And then it depends if he wants to, if it's necessary, perhaps for him to come in. Maybe Spain and Ireland fight you in Milan and Hanover and actually lose, and so it's necessary for him to get involved in order to save his allies. Then he will. But if that war doesn't happen, or it goes favorably for Ireland and Spain, then I think it might be 2 or 3 sessions actually, because he can start raking in a lot of money if he doesn't get involved.
And from an Irish perspective, they did have a player in Norway who was able to take advantage of the lack of colonial players this season, has expanded pretty quickly into North America. It's going to be interesting to watch. The player playing Norway is very experienced. This region's uncontested. How worried should we be about Ireland with a full colonial powerhouse here in North America?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I think pretty much everyone in Europe should be extremely worried, and I know a lot of people aren't exactly pleased about it either, because one of the main drawbacks of going a continental sort of England is that you can't get colonial. And now that he has a very good player that is his vassal, he essentially has all the perks of going colonial without any of the real risks, and still has the huge advantage of being a more continental focused England. So I think pretty much everyone in Europe should be worried, even his allies. He probably won't invade Spain. Doesn't really have much reason to, but you never know.
Yeah. Zale, I'm gonna do a first for this show. I'm gonna put a flag in the ground. I have to attack Ireland next session. I don't see any other course of action. With Cirques and the potential of Eastern America, Ireland's not going to get any weaker. They've got opportunities to expand in the Novgorod node. I'm out of expansion here. I have to attack Ireland.
Yeah, and I think that that's going to make it very interesting, because that leaves the Easterners, as you call them, in a sort of predicament where they have to
Leaves them in a
make a
powerful
decision.
position.
Yeah. They have to make a decision though. Do they attack your side, and let which would be the easier option, the easier route, in my opinion.
Oh, for sure.
And, that would have let Panda and Gabs grow, but it let them grow as well. Or do they kind of side with you now and attack Ireland while you're at war? It's gonna be an interesting session though. That's for sure. Especially depending on what like Bavaria and Milan do, since they kind of can flip flop either way. Jamie might decide, yeah, well, Torsion kind of got to go. Thanks for France. Mind Boy might say, yeah, well, that was a nice agreement, but so we'll see. It's definitely gonna make things shaken up. And like I said before, that's one of those when people pull the trigger, right? It's always going to be a huge risk in these situations, and either it's going to work out well for you guys, and you're going to take down what I believe to be the sort of dominant superpower, even though Bakwanis is doing in a much stronger position in her region. She doesn't quite have the scope of effect that Ireland has right now, because Ireland can influence everything from Anatolia to Russia to France, whereas Balkmanis is kind of just stuck right now in the sort of India-Persia region. So
Yeah,
we'll see. It's definitely going to put a fire under people.
Definitely a threat, but you've got Manchu and Japan rising quickly, so there's a slight counterbalance there. I think Ireland's potential is just, it's too high. I don't see any way out of this. I'm probably going to die, but I think I have to do it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this stems just from the fact that there's no Netherlands. There's no real naval counter, colonial counter to what is going on right now. So I will say that I do think it's the right decision to attack. I just don't know that that was the right decision to announce it so boldly. We'll see. We'll see how it works out.
I'm announcing it. I'm doing it. It's not going to be day one, obviously, but yeah. Or it might be day one, actually. We'll see. Panda's army is a little bit out of position, and so is Gab's, so I can make some quick territorial gains, but yeah, this is going to be a tough one. Should be a fun session. Any advice for me to maybe keep the Easterners out of it or get them in on my
Um,
side?
yeah, no, you definitely want to get him in on your side because it's just a smart thing to do. Um, I don't know. Obviously, I'm not in any position to do anything about it. Um, the Mamluks, if you could somehow convince them to go against Spain, but they're not really. I'll just leave them open to Temi to attack. Though maybe the hope is that they'll have Bahmanis guaranteeing them, sort of. So I don't know. Yeah, it's definitely going to shake things up. That's all I can really say at this point. You don't really have the transports to. Maybe you have enough to get like one guy over there. It's gonna be hard for you. I don't know that you need to get to the mainland though. So
Yeah, I think if I'm not sure how the war score is all going to work out. I'm not very good at calculating that sort of stuff. He does have a
hmm
decent chunk that I could theoretically touch. Um,
yeah, I think you're probably gonna get more yardage out of asking more technical advice, maybe from Jamie or that guy or something like that.
yeah,
But definitely, keeping the war on the continent will help, and focusing. I think this applies to everyone that's going to be having a session or a war this upcoming session, which is probably going to be a huge amount of the players. Focusing down on the regions that you can actually get access to, um, readable access that you can um, keep your sort of maneuver advantage and that sort of stuff. I think that's going to be key. So, this determining whether for you, whether you want to attack the Irish stuff first and get that war score going, or if maybe trying to race Spain out is the right move. I think that's going to be likewise for Poland and Hungary. If they decide to attack you, then do they want to go for a sort of long protracted war to weaken you, or are they going to need to, are they going to want to siege down Hanover real quick and get them out, and then sort of siege you down real quick and get them out? Um, or if they go for Ireland, how much are they going to actually go in for? How long do they want to be at war? How much land do they want to take? And especially for Portugal and by extension Kilwa and Majapahit, how much do they want to get involved? If Portugal gets involved, that leaves Kilwa in a position where maybe they can capitalize. And I don't know if they have the claims or the ability, but they might be able to make some moves on the Cape or definitely into the Congo. Um, and if the Mamluks, they don't really have the ability, but they were able to somehow get into Kanem-Borno. I think Kilwa's in a better position for that. If they can get through the Congo into Benin while a war's going on, they could really capitalize and take advantage of the Iberians being distracted and take over some of that trade. So we could see not just in Europe but in sort of an international scope, pretty significant shift in the power block.
yeah, it's going to be interesting. That's for sure. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, man. I think if I was Majapahit and Kella, I would be extremely worried about um, events in Europe this upcoming session. Um, they there's no navy power as far as I can tell. Majapahit, of course, is trying the best he can. He had a very rough start to the season, so he's finally starting to get where I think he's doing okay, but he's by no means in a great, advantageous position. And so for them, I think, okay, how much do we want to work together? How much do we want to fight in order to, block any potential European expansion, particularly Portuguese expansion? And if I was Japan and Manchu, I'd be asking myself, well, how much do we actually need um, these guys over here? Majapahit. and how can we use that to kind of leverage. And of course, when we're looking at the Middle East issue, with myself and Mamluks and Timurids and Mewar and Bakhmanis, it's just going to be a big question of time. You know, does Timmy kind of have the time to recover enough to delay and stall enough for relief to come? Whether that's from Panda, you know, if you're attacking Panda, Panda probably isn't going to invade me. But if Panda invades me, maybe Timmy tries an early war against the Mamluks because their truce is down. Tries to make a deal with Bakhmanis. I doubt it, but you know, it could be a thing. Yeah, it's definitely going to be. I think, especially after the session, we're going to see a real change of focus. And I don't know where the focus is going to lie, but I think thus far it's sort of been in Italy and in Persia, but this time it's going to be in, you know, northern Germany and Iberia, and who knows what it's going to be next.
Should be a fun session. Thanks for the time, Zal.
Yeah, thank you, man.